Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, it's Christine Collins, and an interesting topic that perhaps you can connect with or relate to in some way is that sometimes when something happens to us, something that has been a challenge, a problem, something negative, some kind of a hardship, and there are many, many different possibilities for what might fit into that category, sometimes the people around us seem to find a need to find a reason, a rationale, or perhaps even more specifically, a reason why we could have done things differently to prevent it. We're all familiar with the concept of hindsight being 20/20, but this goes just another layer deeper under that. Whenever something happens in the news or something is publicly released and someone has had a bad experience, something has occurred, an accident, a hardship, an illness, it seems like many people have almost a psychological need to find a reason why this occurrence is in some way their own fault. And today we're going to take this apart a little bit to better understand what that psychological need is and why this tends to happen. And you may have even found yourself doing this. For example, you see a headline, something has happened, there's been an accident, there's been an event, and you notice yourself finding ways to psychologically distance yourself from it. In other words, to find a reason why that wouldn't happen to you because you do things differently. You take different steps. So there are several different phenomena that are happening with these types of scenarios, and they all kind of piece together in a very interesting little puzzle. There is a deep psychology and neuroscience behind why our brains are actually wired to do this. So one component to this is a psychological need known as a just world hypothesis. And the just world hypothesis is our own deep psychological need to believe that the world is fundamentally fair and predictable. That generally speaking, good things happen to good people, bad things happen to people who somehow deserve it. When we witness suffering, it can somehow threaten this very comforting belief that we may have. And so subconsciously, we are searching for reasons for how that victim has actually caused their own misfortune. So someone loses a job, we think about maybe their performance wasn't so good. Maybe we remember a time when we saw them being not so nice in the work environment, and we start to justify and rationalize why this misfortune has happened to them. There's another even deeper layer underneath this potential belief of wanting to believe in a just world, and that is protecting ourselves subconsciously from our own mortality and our own potential misfortune. And it is essentially management of terror. Our awareness of our own mortality creates like an existential anxiety. And so when we see other people who experience or suffer in some way, it reminds us of our own vulnerability in a way that's deeply uncomfortable. And it unfortunately reminds us of the randomness of life. So at that subconscious level, by finding fault with the victim, they didn't exercise enough, they didn't eat well, they should have saved more money, they ignored warning signs and red flags, we managed to create psychological distance and give ourselves the ongoing illusion that we could have more control. We would be able to prevent that sort of thing for ourselves. So rather than acknowledging that sometimes mechanical failures happen and accidents occur and things fall apart, we immediately ask ourselves, were they texting? They should have left earlier. Maybe they were rushing. We need to believe that accidents are preventable through our own good choices and habits. Now, of course, to some extent, good choices and good habits do make a difference. So definitely not trying to nullify those things. But this neurobiology is very fascinating because often when we witness someone else's suffering, several different brain regions will light up simultaneously. We have the anterior cingulate cortex processing the distress of seeing others in pain. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex immediately gets to work rationalizing and trying to find a reason, a causal attribution for what has occurred. So we begin right away to try to generate explanations in order to protect ourselves from feeling too vulnerable. And then our amygdala, our fear center, which triggers anxiety responses when we feel threatened by hearing these negative things happening. Our brains are actually working overtime just to maintain that irrational belief that it is a just world anytime we may be confronted with innocent suffering. And it even requires extra cognitive resources to try to justify and rationalize all of this, which gives us an idea of just how far our brains are willing to go to preserve our sense of control. To go an even deeper layer, one more layer down, there's another component that is particularly fascinating here, and that is when we witness or see or hear about something that we feel in some way is more similar to us or more personally threatening to us. So for example, someone who seems similar to us suffers a random tragedy, a random bad experience. We tend to experience even more anxiety and are therefore even more highly motivated to find a controllable cause and a plausible explanation, as if to say, if I can just figure out what they did wrong, I can prevent the same thing from happening to me. So that is why when someone our own age gets a serious health diagnosis, or someone that we have something in common with is befallen with some type of tragic circumstance, there's a tendency to immediately start scrutinizing lifestyle choices, stress levels, diet, exercise, even when sometimes things are caused by genetics and there's just not truly a control completely over the situation. So the more alike we feel to the victim sometimes, the more likely we are to victim blame. Now we also have some layers with cognitive biases. When we have a deep-seated belief system and the new information that's coming in from learning about this event is actually challenging our existing beliefs and our existing reality, and we resolve that discomfort by changing our perception of the victim rather than taking on board this new information that, oh yes, this can happen to people. Oh yes, this is a thing that can occur. And then we tend to retroactively identify warning signs that actually may not have even existed. But when we look back and we start to think about things, we feel as though we can find those red flags that were there. They seem obvious now, but they weren't actually predictive at the time. Even if we had noticed them at the time, more than likely they would not have actually prevented anything. And we automatically downplay any contradictory evidence to whatever our belief system is. So if someone has a financial hardship, we remember all of the different mistakes and financial troubles and spending frivolously, while forgetting that perhaps there are 10 other people who are financially responsible that also struggled, perhaps for different reasons, medical bills or job loss. And what makes all of this even more powerful is that it gets reinforced socially, because everybody who's witnessing it is kind of in the same position of wanting to find that psychological distance from what has happened. So they're all kind of engaging together in victim analysis. And it becomes a system justification, a collective need to believe that existing systems and outcomes are fair and legitimate. Just like when people are let go from a job, the remaining people convince themselves that those people weren't really performing, rather than acknowledging that sometimes bad things really do happen to good people. The psychological cost of doing this is, of course, when we ourselves find ourselves in a problematic situation, it becomes turned right on us. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about natural disasters, accidents, illness, personal setbacks. Humans consistently have the psychological need to find these controllable explanations for suffering. And unfortunately, the person in the situation may internalize the messages that they're getting from the people around them and also begin blaming themselves. And that can compound what they're already experiencing, adding on heaps heap upon heap to their recovery efforts and mental health challenges. Having other people analyze all of your mistakes can be incredibly damaging, not to mention isolating. And overall, it can make us less compassionate and less helpful, less willing to help people who are in very challenging scenarios. Rather than acknowledging that sometimes life is random and sometimes things happen, rather than blaming the person, we create these false narratives about having control that aren't true. So once we kind of begin to tease this apart, dissect it, analyze it, and recognize it with a level of awareness, we can notice these trends within ourselves and when it happens in other people. We can stop ourselves from immediately jumping to some of these assumptions and judgments and ask whether we're really trying to understand what happened or trying to reassure ourselves. By increasing the awareness of some of these tendencies, we can increase our own compassion, not only for other people that we are witnessing in their own struggles, but also for ourselves when the struggles are ours. So I hope you found this to be interesting. And if you are looking for additional layers of support, whether it's for a challenging situation or just everyday mental well-being and mindset, I offer a series of tools like hypnosis audios, yoga nidra journeys, meditations, and EFT tapping videos to help get through whatever may be happening for you. And you can check all of that out in the show notes if you are interested. And until the next time we connect, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at transformcreate.com.